Welcome to Mucho TV, where we learn from one another and grow. My name is Janvier Nahimana. I'm with a special guest, George Makinto. For those who don't know you, who is George Makinto?
Well, George Makinto is a complex person that has been redeemed by Christ, and I say this because I'm from a bicultural background. My father is from Germany, and my mother is from Liberia in West Africa, and they met under very interesting circumstances. But as I grew up in Germany, with being the only Black person in my town, that came with lots of challenges. And because of the racial connotations of a German society that doesn't really at that time, this is the 60s now, didn't really know how to deal with Black people, and including my own family, where my mom, unfortunately, she left when I was 6 months old. So I grew up with a purely German family with German siblings, my father remarrying. And so it was hard to express Blackness. And I had expressions of musicality that went beyond the normal context of a German classical music background. I did study classical music, classical piano in Germany, but I started to bang on the kitchen table rhythms that nobody could understand. And so as I went to look for my African roots, it took me over many, many countries, and I ultimately got to Liberia, met my family, went to New York, met my mother who was living in New York, and at that time I spent years in Spain, in Paris, France. I lived in Ivory Coast for many years in Abidjan. Traveled all over Africa, more than 20 countries in Africa. I did music studies in many countries. I participated in music projects in Burkina Faso, Ouagadougou, in Niamey, Niger. I became pretty famous in Abidjan with a new style of music called Afro Soul. So I dived deeply into my African roots. And so my music combines African and European and American music, because living in Paris, I played a lot of jazz, played a lot of gospel music, had my own gospel group, recorded CDs and stuff like that. I became an international artist that lives in the connection of cultures. And so now I've been living in the United States, in New York and in Los Angeles for 20 years now, and I've been collaborating with many people. So that is my background. That is my musical background. Now, I said Christ because I was very unpeaceful in these times. It was a search, and so as I found Christ, I found that Amahoro, actually, that we will be talking about, and so that brought a spiritual foundation to my richness, my talent. I'm a very talented person in many different areas, but you have to be able to purposefully express that talent. And so that's what I'm doing now, and it is a joy to bless other people with it.
Thank you very much to share your background. So I get a time just to look some website that share your stories, and the link that you send me about Myriam Makeba, really get a chance to attend her concert, and we know how famous she is for as a human being, also as an artist. Shares your connection with Myriam Makeba, your experience you get performing with her.
Well, I met Myriam Makeba in Paris in probably around 1993, 94. I was at that time very active on the Paris music scene, and I had started to work on my own album with African jazz and African soul. And one of my dear friends, Raymond Doumbé, shout out to Raymond Doumbé here. He's from Cameroon. He was the bass player of Myriam Makeba, and that day he said, "Look, we're having a show in the TV, but our piano player couldn't make it. Can you jump in?" Well, I had listened to Myriam Makeba since I was little. I had records of her, and so I said, "Sure, I can do this." And so I went to the TV station. We had a short rehearsal, and I was pushed on stage, and I pretty much know every song. And I was hired right after that concert to do a tour and the subsequent world tours with Myriam Makeba, where we met with Nelson Mandela. We traveled sometimes with Pope Jean Paul II to the Vatican. I did a concert with Myriam Makeba at the Vatican with the Philharmonic Orchestra of Rome. We went to Brazil. We went to many, many places, Italy. We did world tours. And it was a joy because what she taught me is that you can connect music with political and social activism. And that activism, she expressed that in her fight against apartheid, uh, because she was on the blacklist and had to flee South Africa because she spoke out against apartheid. And so that connected us with people like Nelson Mandela, whose birthday party, for example, we played in the German president's palace. And so we had wonderful stories. But what she taught us is that you can use your art to make statements and to touch people for political and social injustice causes. And that's what I have been doing ever since.
Thank you very much. It's really a rich experience with her because we know that her fight was really important that to change the society in South Africa.
By the
And
way, by the way,
mhm,
Jean-Pierre,
mhm,
that concert in Brussels,
mhm.
was it just Myriam Makeba? Wasn't there a Burundian?
Yeah, Kajanin, she was singing.
Which means you have seen me on stage.
Sorry, I couldn't imagine that I saw you on stage.
You have
Really.
seen me on stage because we were with Kajanin that day.
I'm drummer. I drum Burundi drums, and I perform around the world too. I perform in Moscow, in Italy, in Spain, and France. And Kajanin, she invited us in Paris to perform when she was singing with Sting.
Yes.
And we were on Bercy stage with Kajanin, Burundi drums, singing a song for with Sting. It was really I remember day for me. It's really something that I can't forget in my life. So, as you said, art is really powerful. When I'm in front of Burundi drums, drumming, I'm in another world. The spirit is going away and sharing my uh, yeah, my spirit knowledge in the art to connect with other people, and you feel how people are happy. So it's really important that we continue that to share our experience for younger generation because it's important that our roots from Africa, we continue that to show that it's really important to promote our diversity. So you have a long list of different performances. What bring you to Sydney?
Sydney.
Yeah.
Well, we were with Myriam Makeba in Sydney, Australia. We actually, matter of fact, we did a whole Australia tour. And in Sydney, it was very interesting because the Sydney Opera House is actually a very big stage. It has actually probably, I can't remember if it was 50 or 100 different stages. It's not just one stage. And I remember in Sydney, I was, we had just arrived from the airport. We went to the Opera House, and I was in the backstage, and the Sydney Opera House is so big. And I said, oh, let me just go to the restroom before the concert. And so the band had already gone on stage. And when I came out of the restroom, I took a wrong turn, and I went to a different route, and I couldn't find the stage. So then there were speakers all over the place, and I was running through empty halls, and I heard the music start, and this I was supposed to start the show, and then the guitar player started the show, and I was like, where is the stage? And I was running all over the place, and because they had speakers, I didn't know where the natural sound came from. It took me about 5 minutes to find the stage, and the band had already started, and that was my introduction to the Sydney Opera House. But we did a wonderful concerts really all over the world with Myriam Makeba, Italy, Europe, Belgium, Germany, France, everywhere. We traveled extensively, and it was not just for the playing part, but as well to hear her stories, because she had an interesting life. And she was married 5 times, and all her husbands were activists. Hugh Masekela was a trumpet player I performed with for the United Nations, right before becoming myself a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador for the United Nations, in our in our quest to bring relief to our African community, because once we met with my wife, and maybe you will have some questions about that. But once we met, we decided from different angles to connect our urge to bring social justice to our community. And when we started Amahoro International, she was very active in the United Nations, and I became a Goodwill Ambassador for the United Nations as well. And so we used our talents, her activism, her advocacy, and me, my music, to bring light to AIDS orphans, to refugees, and to people in Africa who have no voice and need one.
Tell us a little about worship His Majesty. What that was it a concept of a show, or it's just a song? Can you tell us about worship His Majesty?
Well, that has something to do with my spiritual journey. I have been an atheist or agnostic for most of my adult life. From my father's side, the German side is all agnostic, and so I never knew about God, Jesus. Nobody had told me about him, and when I had certain experiences that are too long to describe right now. But when we moved to New York City in 1999, um, I um, I was asked to play the piano in a church, in a small little church on Roosevelt Island, by a very, very wonderful singer called Juanita Fleming. And she introduced me to Christ. And once I became a Christian, which I will probably talk the exact details another time, we became very involved in worshiping the Lord. And I had, as a performer, I had to be re-educated in the way that I played music, because when you are a performer, most of the time you want to have the limelight for yourself. You want to be the star. Now, when you worship, God is the star, you see? And so as we use our talents to worship God, we want to be in the background to highlight the glory of God. So, I relearned to use my art for worship. And as I am still am fashioned by God, he used my talent for, for several and many things. And one of the things was that our church had the idea to worship God at Madison Square Garden. Now, we were a very small church, maybe just 50 or 60 or 70 parishioners. But we said, well, God is big enough and he wants to be worshiped at Madison Square Garden. And so we did it. We actually organized a Worship His Majesty event, and we performed our worship at Madison Square Garden, and we did it several times. Starting, I think it was the first time was the year 2003. It might be 2002 or 2003.
So let's now back to the family, and now tell us about MUKARABE, how you meet her, what's her place in your life.
Well, MUKARABE is a Burundian, as you are, and she comes from a simple background, but because her father was a champion of education, and especially a champion of education for women, he actually sent all his daughters to school, and with big sacrifices, to the point that he passed away when my wife was 2 or 3 years old. And so, being a seventh child of a single mother's household bears a lot of challenges, as you might know as a Burundian. You will be ostracized by being a child of a widow. So she has a strong fiber of injustice. When she sees injustice, she reacts very strongly and tries to fight injustice. And so she was able to do a BA at the University of Burundi for English, and then had to flee because of the genocide, and ended up in Kenya with the United Nations in the World Food Program, where she was actually in charge distributing food to the refugee camps that opened up because of the genocide now in Rwanda. And she led as well another World Food Program in Madagascar, and came to the United States to finish her university education, and got a double master's in health and health management. So she has a strong will, and she has always worked and fought for her people, and for all people in Burundi. You know, as you know, there's two groups in your country, and so she has never considered this division. And I want to highlight that, because even for me, as somebody who is married to a Burundian, I don't see Tutsis and I don't see Hutus. I see Burundians. I see children of God. I see Africans, and I see people who want to have Amahoro. And so this is not a question of racial division or favoritism. It is a question of humanity and people who belong to God, who want to have a decent life. And that's what she has always been fighting for. And so she went to the United Nations. She spoke before the General Assembly of the United Nations and highlighted the plight of AIDS orphans at that time. And so, because the United Nations is a big organization, we felt that it was better for us to form our own nonprofit organization to be able to work on the grassroots with the people. And that's what we have been doing since the year 2000. Now, for 20 years, we have been fighting for the downtrodden, the widows, the orphans, the refugees. And my wife has a very strong voice in the region, really. And people respect her because she says, she speaks the truth. And she speaks the truth in a nonpartisan and impartial way.
So, how now the project for Amahoro International started? Your action in Uganda and different parts of the world. Tell us about that project, Amahoro International.
So Amahoro International, as I said, was born out of the urge to do something for specific people and to connect the communities that we live in and the communities that we work for. So as we are in America, we connected with those communities. When we were in New York and New Jersey, we connected with the local communities there and talked to them about African challenges, especially to the African American community who have a very strong connection with Africa by history. And so at the same time, we took care of our Burundian family, and so as some of the sisters and husbands of my wife passed away with AIDS, we took care of those children, and we started a orphans group home called Rugaba's Children. And you know what Rugaba means, that is God's, it's God's children. And so we brought several of the orphans through, gave them a shelter, gave them school and college education. And because we assisted them, they started orphans initiatives and we were able to assist them. So it became very big in Burundi at the time, so that we actually could go to Burundi. Matter of fact, I remember going to Burundi in 2009 to do a camp for children that I had previously started here in America called Joyful Noise Music Camp. And we were able to work together with a local church in Bujumbura, and assembled 250 AIDS orphans for a whole month, fed them every day, taught them music, taught them dance, used the Burundian drums for rhythm. We did a soccer camp, and so we were able to actually encourage orphans and let them know that they are valuable people and that God loves them and that they have talent. And so we started to teach them their own value and form them. So because in 2015, with the political mayhem that happened in Burundi, many of those orphans had to run away, and thousands of them ran away to Uganda. Some of the orphans that we actually had brought through were amongst the refugees. And so we had one contact in Uganda who facilitated a place for us where we could buy a house. I mean, we could buy land and build a house in Uganda. And on this ground, we've actually created the Amahoro Life Center. And the Amahoro Life Center is a place where Burundian refugees in Uganda can learn skills, are trained in leadership training, can do agricultural for self-sustainability, and we have created projects of empowerment in Uganda for Burundian refugees. And so right now, as it stands, we have the Joyful House of Refuge, which is a residential home for Burundian refugees. We have the Amani Barbershop, which is a barbershop that is run by Burundian refugees and is training others. We have a chicken farm where people can actually work, and we have agricultural land where people can plant, and we have a computer learning center where people can actually learn computer skills. So it is all about empowerment to educate the next generation of African leaders of integrity, knowledge, and by their training can become better leaders for Africa than the leaders we have today.
Really, it's I applaud that. That's really a very big project and a needed project in the area in our country. We know that the lack of support for young generation. There are kids, on the streets. So now you live in the US and you have a community around you. I saw that you have a center for uh, joyful music art center. What, how you spread your experience, your peace way to via music? How, what the activity you have in that joyful music center?
So Joyful Music and Arts is a music academy here in Los Angeles where we are now living. And it is a music center. It's a little bit different than other music centers, as that we not just teach music, but we communicate the love for music. And the love for music, you have to be able to play together with people. And because a lot of children, they go to music lessons, they learn to play the piano for many, many years, but they never connect with other people. And as you, as a drummer, know that playing your own drum by yourself is not really that interesting. But when you play it with people together and you create a sound, you create a community of sound, you create a community of rhythm and a unity, and that connects people. And so we are very performance oriented. And so here in this community, we have lots of people from all. It's a very international community uh, that we serve, and so the people here are able to learn different instruments and in a yearly concert bring them together with bands. We make orchestra, we make bands, and so they are able to play together, and we have lots of success teaching that joy of music to the children, because music is not just music, it trains you for other things. And so we motivate children to to find themselves in the music and to find what are they good about, what are they good for, what is their purpose. And so we have a more holistic approach to the teaching of music. And then obviously, as a performer myself, I still perform concerts, obviously pre-COVID 19. I've been involved in library shows, in school performances, because I'm very focused in trying to educate the next generation. So I do this here in America as I do this in Africa as well. And so we have to, as the former generation, as the older generation, we have a responsibility in training the young people to be better than we were and to not make the same mistakes and to connect together and find a way to find a common goal. And that's what we are wishing and praying for Burundi, that people in Africa as well, there's many challenges in Africa, and because of colonism and the way that Africa has been divided, we are we have a divided society, and we want to break that division by bringing people together. And I do this with my music school as well as I do this with Amahoro International.
Now let's arrive to Amahoro, the song, which now is becoming international. Or we are sharing this every time people say, wow, that is really simple but strong as a message. Tell us about how you started this project for that song and what the message for that song.
Well, our our organization is called Amahoro International, which means peace for the whole world. And as you now know, our Ugandan projects, they are ongoing and they are growing. But obviously, we need money to do this. And so, because of COVID, we couldn't do the fundraisers that we usually do. And so, out of the idea of, well, how do we tell people about Amahoro? we stepped back a little bit and said, no, actually, this is not about money. This is really about the message. And so the message of Amahoro, we need to let people know what Amahoro actually is. And so we had the idea of letting many people all over the world say the word Amahoro and see how they relate to it. And so because we have family all over the world, um, we actually collected video clips of people saying Amahoro all over the world. And you see the video and you see that there's my daughter actually who lives in Sweden. She says Amahoro. I have a son in Spain. That's my son. And he says Amahoro. And we have people in Germany. You will see my wife's brother and our nephew. They say Amahoro. But we have people in Nigeria. We have people in Switzerland. We have people all over the world saying Amahoro. And then I composed the song. So I wrote the song and I arranged the song together with my son, who as well, I have 5 sons and 1 daughter, and they are all in the, most of the sons are in the video. And so we arranged the song, but then I had the idea, well, let me collaborate with a couple of people that I have had artistic collaborations in the last 30 years. And so my producer who produced my records, who is in Tokyo, Tommy Snyder, I asked him and his daughter, who is a very famous singer in Japan, if they could sing it with me. And I have Linda Lee Hopkins, who's a very famous gospel and jazz singer in Paris, and Sophia Nelson and Lenka Shockley here. And so I asked a couple of artists that I hold very dear if they could sing. And so they went to the studio and sang their songs, and we pieced it all together. And it became just a wonderful project that already in its making shows how people work together and how people are able, although separated, to function on one spirit. And that is the Amahoro spirit. And the Amahoro spirit has been is explained by my wife very powerfully in the beginning of the video, and as well my son who's doing one of the messages, just showing and learning and teaching about what Amahoro means. Amahoro is not just the absence of war. It's not just the absence of conflict. It's a positive way. It's a decision that we make to come to our neighbor and let him participate or her in our lives, connect positively. And it's a concept of well-being, of spiritual, emotional, physical well-being that is holistic, and that incorporates the person as well as the relationships we have.
So now we are in this time that we see no good news. What happened for Black communities in the US? What is your message? What is your feeling about Black Lives Matters? What happened in the US, and what happened really for African descent around the world? What do you have as a message?
Well, for many, many years, the world entirely has suffered by white supremacy. And, that started when people from European descent went to Africa to colonize it. It went to America to colonize it. And went then from America to Africa to steal people and make them work and make them slaves. So we have a very big unbalancedness in the world, and the issues and challenges that we have today here in America, not just in America, but very strongly in America, because in Canada as well, as you are in Canada, these unbalancedness, this racial injustice stems from a historic, it has historic nature. And so we have to, first of all, educate people that this is the reality. And many people don't know the history. So it is important to tell people, and I have done this even with a lot of white friends, and they didn't know the history. They didn't know the extent of the atrocity of racial injustice, you know. And many of them said, well, now it's different, so let's just get over it. But you can't get over a generational curse. So we do have a lot of work to do, and we are as well involved in the fight for racial justice, because it's the same fight in Africa. And we are showing that there is a connection between the Western world, Canada and America, and Africa, because we have the same challenges, you know. Although African countries are are now not colonized anymore, but there is a economical colonism. There is with old structures, and even the leaders that are currently leading African countries are very strongly connected with the old colonizers and are leading in that spirit. So we haven't gotten rid of the colonist um, um, mechanisms. But here in the Western world, I think that it is very important to so we do support the Black Lives Matter movement, and not the extreme, you know, the extreme forms of it. You know, obviously we don't condone the senseless destruction of property, for example. You know, but these are really the minority of people. The majority of people want to have an equitable system. And so we have to slowly stem and balance back, and just say that, you know, Black people, when we say Black people, Black Lives Matter, you know, that really says Black Lives Matter also. They matter because before they haven't mattered. And so we have to bring this idea of, well, we are all equal, and in front of the law. We have to bring this into reality.
So we are almost at the end of our show, and please share my message. I would like to speak to my sister MUKARABE. I would like to get an interview from her because she has too much to tell, and I will try to reach her and request an interview in the coming days when she will be available. So, in a spiritual way, what is your wish for the future?
Well, you know, as a Christian and as a pastor, I do believe that we all are children of God, and we have talents and gifts. You know, the Bible says that we are wonderfully and fearfully made and knit together in our mother's womb, with a purpose that God has given from the very beginning. So we're all valuable people. And first of all, I pray that people will find their worth within the context of God's will, and work together to make this world a better place. You see, we have this earth, and this is the only physical earth that we have, and we have to take care of it. So as responsible people, I wish that we can eliminate divisions that we have, and these are cultural divisions, these are racial divisions, these are political divisions, ethnical divisions, that we can come above, and be above those divisions. Recognize that these are divisions are really evil mechanisms to bring us apart, to separate us. And when we work together, we are actually very strong. And so my prayer is that as people, by the Spirit of God, we can come together and work together for the good of everybody, eliminate poverty, eliminate racism, eliminate these big problems, poverty, that really hold us back from being Amahoro, from living Amahoro. And so we sponsor and proclaim Amahoro over the whole world. And you can obviously read about our all the things that we do on our website, amahorointernational.net, and as well on my website, makinto.com. And you probably can show the people how to get there. But we love to work together with people. We love to include people's talent, people's connection. We feel that we need to come together as people with different organizations to proclaim that Amahoro and work and work physically and work strongly to make people's lives better. And I salute you with your TV show, Mucho Radio, Mucho TV. I'm thinking that you're doing a great job because in your corner you actually do that as well. By the way, I've been to Halifax during 9/11. I'm not sure if you want that story. I mean, you probably don't have time, but it was a quite interesting story that I will tell another
Yeah,
time.
I have a time. Just continue to tell us stories.
Oh well. In 9/11. This was September 11th, 2001. I was on my way. I had just done a concert in Douarnenez, France, in Brittany, dans la Bretagne. This is in France, and I have done a gospel concert with a good friend of mine, Clem Ashford, and I was on my way back. And so I went Paris, Munich, New York, and in the air we heard. I was together with some journalists because it was the Fashion Week in New York, and they had a satellite television telephone, and they heard that something had happened in New York, and the pilot said, "Okay, I'm going to turn back to Munich," but he didn't, because at that particular moment we had entered Canadian airspace, and so they grounded all the airplanes within 20 minutes. And so all those jumbo jets that were flying to America all landed in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And so in about half an hour, 30 jumbo jets landed in Halifax. And they were parked all over the place in Halifax. You know how big Halifax Airport is. It's very small, So we were the last airplane to debark at 4 o'clock in the morning. And we were driven to a military camp 2 hours south of Halifax, and we spent the week there. And so we spent a week there with 2,000 people in that camp from all over the world. And I was able to, because I speak many languages, I was able to interpret for many people who did not know what was going on and were shocked and were in disarray and had no idea what was happening. People from Italy, from Spain, from wherever they came from, and so I was able to perform as well in the military camp, and so just to serve to the good for the people there. And then on the next Sunday, we were able to catch a bus back on 24 hours drive to New York City and arrived Sunday evening. So that was my time in Halifax and Nova Scotia during the 9/11 attacks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You have too much to tell. I think that is the beginning. We're gonna try maybe a monthly show and share your stories. And also, believe me, you touched hurt. So your message we gonna spread the Amahoro message around the world as we can. I have been selected as Peace One Day ambassador for Atlantic Canada. Last year, I organized an event in front of the City Hall, and it was really good. But the most important also is to bring young generation take part of the change and understand how we need to fight for the peace around the world. So 2020, it will be no easy with COVID. So I'm trying there to organize a virtual show, maybe based on Amahoro song, and let people, because we now Halifax became an international city. There are very much from around the world, and Halifax grows quickly. Now they are building convention center, hotels, condos. It's really a beautiful city. So I will try just to connect with people from around the world, ask them to speak Amahoro, and connect with your song. The most important is that to continue to spread your message around the world, and also let know about Amahoro International. If someone can help, it can be interesting. Thank you very much coming to our show.
I will at one point invite you to my radio show. I haven't mentioned that I am now on the radio as well. We have the Amahoro broadcast from Cape Praise, San Diego 106.1, and on AM 1210. And so we will be able to as well interview each other. And so whatever you have, we can promote it as well on our radio show, the Amahoro broadcast.